and welcome to the Newsroom with Sana. Today we're going to be taking a look at three important stories. The first is going to be with reference to the very important foreign ministers meeting that was held in Istanbul regarding the situation in Gaza. And this, of course, is something that is under concern and focus because of the ceasefire violations that we have seen committed by Israel that also blames Hamas. But of course, ultimately, the fragile brokered deal at the moment on ground that needs to be protected. This is a very, very integral deal, of course, in terms of the way forward in the peace agreement that was brought together by multiple countries. And now a lot of these countries who contributed towards that peace deal have gotten together once again to speak about the international security of task force that will be integral in making sure that the situation on ground is protected. But there are a number of challenges and aspects that still need to be discussed as to how exactly that will move forward and what will be the key elements as part of that. That's going to be our focus in the first segment. Our next story is going to take a look at the New York mayoral elections, in which, of course, a lot of discussion and debate is being carried out, and we have three candidates, with the most important, Mamdani, being a clear favorite to win, and by a lot of the independent polls seem to have a leading margin. At the same time, we know that the former governor Andrew Cuomo has been endorsed by Trump and Musk, and he also is somebody who the Department of Justice had put together serious sexual allegations. And so it's important to, of course, see what really is going to be the outcome of these mayoral elections and the impact that will have on the situation in New York, with Trump threatening to cut down on funds in case Mamdani wins. We're also going to be taking a look in our last story at what is going on in Brazil, that is set to host the very important COP30 that is going to be taking place on the 6th of November onwards, and this, of course, is a very important situation for the area. However, there has been a huge crackdown against the drug gangs in Brazil that has resulted in over 100 people that have died in the confrontation between the police and these gangs. And so it remains to be seen what really means in terms of the on-ground situation that this represents and the way forward that Rio de Janeiro is going to be taking a look more closely at what the situation represents and how it needs to be moved forward. We're now going to be taking a look at our first story that focuses on the very important meeting in Istanbul and the way forward in Gaza. For that, we've been joined by Professor Dr. Vişne Korkmaz, who is the international relations expert at Istanbul Nişantaşı University. Thank you very much, Dr. Vişne, for being part of today's discussion. I'd like your take on the role you think that Turkey can play in making sure that there is a proper way forward in Gaza. Of course, a lot of the important aspects in the first phase of the deal were already brokered, and a number of these countries whose foreign ministers have gotten together yesterday did, of course, contribute a lot to that. But what now is important is to protect this fragile ceasefire and to make sure that the situation on ground improves and does not deteriorate. But how exactly do you think that can be done by countries like Turkey, who, of course, hosted this very important meet?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for hosting me, and good evening for our audience. Maybe it is better to start with this Monday meeting among the foreign ministers of the region. It was an important meeting from two aspects at least. And the first aspect is related to your question, actually. And according to me, this aspect is more important than anything because there are many uncertainties before us now. And as you mentioned, it is very fragile ceasefire. Israel seems to be provocateur, seems to continue its violation, and Tel Aviv, of course, is not happy to internationalize this issue, Gazan issue. So, I mean, there are we don't know still the details of the draft resolution of United States related to ISF. So there are many uncertainties. So that is why the first aspect that's related to regions stand related to Gaza conflict or Gaza war is more important done anything till now. Um, as you know, there are many differences among the regional actors related to Hamas, related to future of Hamas, related to activeness of Hamas in the Gaza, and related to resistance, the idea of resistance. Despite of all these differences, regional actors, and now I should also mention the Turkish factor because Turkey worked very hard as starting from the beginning. It worked very hard to reach that point to provide a kind of consensus based on coordination and dialogue among the regional actors on this issue. Palestinians suffering in Gaza is unbearable. There is no need to discuss this issue. But because of differences, the region has had difficulties to come together and to reflect a common standing on this issue. Now we can see this. And this is very important. This is a kind of pressure and very important pressure on Israel. Also, this is a trigger for international community to pressurize Israel. This is also a bargaining chip at the face of Trump administration because Trump administration wants to see that this ceasefire will work and Gaza conflict will be over. At least, I mean, maybe not on the sincere level, but at least um, um, indivisible framework. He wants to see normalization of Gaza in that way. So that is very important. Turkey actually has emerged a kind of facilitator of this coordination. From diplomatic point of view, Turkey tries a lot to bring all the regional states coming from different understandings related to Hamas and Israeli issue. And they, on the table there is issue of humanitarian sufferings and how the Gazans um, uh, is facing existential threat because of the Israeli revisionist act.
But I'd like to explore further in terms of the kind of ceasefire violations that we've seen committed by Israel. What can be done by the influence or the input by these very important countries that can change the situation on ground? And so I want your take on what will be the discussion forward, particularly when this goes back to the United States in terms of what the ceasefire violations have been since the 10th of October, and also in terms of the kind of blame game that we see in the international community with Israel, of course, calling out Hamas and Hamas citing concerns with regards to airstrikes. How exactly will then a ceasefire be respected that was agreed by these very parties?
Yeah, Israel, committed violences related to ceasefire, and Hamas actually appears to commit the ceasefire still. This is important, and this difference should be seen, should be visible, and should be voiced and heard. And Turkish officials, including President Mr. Erdogan, underlined this difference. Israel wants to break ceasefire, and Hamas seems to keep ceasefire on the right track. This is important. And also, what is important? Continuation of international pressure over Israel, because still there's unbearable sense of fear among the Gazans, hunger, and different kind of shortages still are weaponized by Israel. So the Gaza issue has not been solved yet. So international pressure should be on a right track in that sense. According to United States, not just because of the unbearable nature of Gazan conflict, but because of the United States desire to design a new regional order in the Middle
Yeah.
East. Trump administration wants to solve Gazan issue. It is a kind of unwinnable war for Israel. So I mean, and it will lead much more risk and cost to Israel and United
Absolutely.
States as a rational
Thank
actor
you very much,
more than
Dr. Vishne.
Israel.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Vishne, for joining us and being a part of the newsroom today and sharing your valuable insight. We've also been joined by former Ambassador Mr. G.R. Baluch, and we'll be speaking to him regarding this as well. Welcome to the newsroom, Ambassador Baluch. I want your take on when we talk about what really is going on in the current scenario. It is important to see that now we need to move ahead from what was earlier agreed on the 10th of October and to protect this very fragile ceasefire. But an important discussion of this meeting that was held between the foreign ministers of the 7 countries hosted by Turkey is what will the International Security Task Force look like and what sort of guarantees will be provided as part of the ceasefire, because that of course means a lot of threat that will be extended to whoever is part of this task force. And so while the possibility of airstrikes is still there, how exactly will this task force be implemented? What exactly will it achieve? And how will be the representation done by these very important countries? Are any of these questions answered by either the UNSC or the United States? Has anybody figured out what this will look like?
Thank you, Sana. I think there's several, question marks, which, like in your narrative, the entire world is actually trying to grapple with those question marks. Uh, so I think before I go on to that, let me comment on the significance of this meeting of the OIC, extraordinary meeting of the foreign ministers in Istanbul. I think it has not only a symbolic significance, symbolic in the sense that it shows the commitment of the OIC and a follow up and pretty quick follow up of the earlier engagement of these countries in the process which was initiated of by Mr. Trump's 20 points peace plan, which is not a truce plan. You see, that's the important thing we have to understand. So, what actually our foreign ministers are discussing, our means the OIC foreign minister, and especially Pakistan, is very clear about it that this is just not enough. This truce is not enough. This 20 point peace plan, it has to lead to a sustainable peace and ultimately the reconstruction of Gaza and ultimately the autonomy and the realization of the dream of the state of Palestine. So, what they are thinking is that, yes, first of all, I think what I see the scenario, perhaps if all the parties agree, to which I'm sure, yes, before we go on to that, what is going to happen in the UN, let's see what are the roadblocks. The roadblock, the biggest block is, in fact, Israel. The biggest roadblock is Netanyahu. The biggest roadblock is his ragtag uh, cabinet, which consists of all extremists and warmongers, racists, and rank fascists. That being the case, now how much leverage US has to overcome these roadblocks in the shape of Israel and its establishment, which is now standing against peace. Now I switch over to what
Yeah.
would probably happen in the UN and what they have the OIC extraordinary meeting of the foreign ministers have asked the United Nations to streamline, to tell the world, to tell the countries which want to commit their troops that what will be the mandate of what is being termed as the stabilization force. So the very nomenclature is about preventing further aggression by Israel, preventing further for attacks by Israel, intrusions by Israel, by any other settlements if they are planning as such. So this stabilization force has to be given mandate. But very important, which was again reiterated by our foreign minister, deputy prime minister, Mr. Safdar, and the able foreign minister of Turkey, the hosts, that at no point OIC or the Arab countries would agree to any plan which precludes the governing of Gaza by other than Palestinians. So Gaza has to be governed by them. And in fact, they have gone on further that even it should be protected by the Arabs, if not Palestinians. So what I see is that there will be a Muslim stroke Arab force. Now, the most important thing is that will it be, because normally what happens is that technically in the UN, since I had the privilege of being there in Pakistan's mission, so these mandates are not open-ended. They have to be given a certain deadline. Then they have to be renewed depending on the mandate has to be renewed depending on the situation on ground. So that has to be decided that what is the timeline, because that's also important. It cannot be an open-ended. It means then again the Palestinians and Gaza people, they are there uh, under some other force other than their own. And then how quickly the reconstruction of Gaza has to start. The plans are there, the funding is there.
Yeah.
Most important thing is to have those enabling environments. So I think if the UN can work on this philosophy of achieving enabling in our environment for a sustainable peace, a pathway to the ultimate realization of the state of Palestine, and of course, immediately the reconstruction of Gaza. Yes.
Absolutely, but Ambassador Saab, I want to understand then where do you think is the possibility of actually putting feet on the ground? Because a lot of what is being asked when we see this international task force and the duties that it will have to perform depends on this enabling environment that you're talking about for the UN to be able to provide. But given the current scenario, even despite this US brokered peace deal, despite the ceasefire technically in place, we've seen the violations and we've seen excuses to do just that. What's the guarantee for this international task force in terms of course, the protection of any individuals that are on ground?
Definitely, when such if the task force, which will be definitely formed, it will be under a UN Security Council resolution. So it will have the mandate. Mandate means the approval of the entire global community, which is a great force. Although we have seen the audacity of Israel violating all the international norms.
Yeah.
So you are right that we do not have any guarantee whether Israel will still respect any mandate given to a stabilization force, uh, which is there to make sure that a process of stabilization, the way the word means, is initiated. So there is a problem, but I think what has happened here is that America has, or Mr. Trump, if I say so, because he's the one who decides now everything in America. So he has put his own reputation at stake, not only reputation, but I think the very geostrategic now relations that US has with these Gulf countries seem to be shaky. In fact, we are so proud that we have a mutual defense agreement with Saudi Arabia. But sure enough, some of the analysts do say that it does reflect lack of confidence of the Gulf countries in the that silhouetted umbrella of safety that was presumed to be given by US to these Gulf countries. So I think there is a problem of credibility for US. So if it has to maintain its credibility as a global actor in the Gulf, which is a very vital region and beyond. In fact, it's not only that, but I think it's about keeping its uh, influence in the MENA area, that is Middle East and North Africa in a way, to some quite an extent. So I think probably this time around, I'm pretty hopeful that U.S. government would find a balance in appeasing the Zionists sitting in Israel, and they are able to prevent those Zionist lobbyists working in Washington and elsewhere, and they would outstand for the international law, they would stand for the human rights, they'll stand for peace, they'll stand for the rights of the Palestinians.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ambassador Baluch, for being part of the discussion. That is the hope, and we, of course, hope that we are able to achieve that, because a lot that was envisioned is something that we still haven't really seen on the ground in terms of the commitments not being upheld by Israel. And so it is very, very integral to see the situation on ground and to make sure that when we speak about an international task force, it really has the protection on ground and is able to deliver what it is meant for in terms of the ceasefire and the end of the suffering of people of Gaza and the very important humanitarian aid that must reach its people. We're now going to be taking a look at our next story that focuses on what is going on in the U.S., particularly the New York City mayoral elections, in which three candidates, of course, are there on the run, with Mamdani expected to be in the lead and expected to become the first Muslim mayor of New York. And this, of course, is bringing its own complications to the situation, with Mr. Trump and Elon Musk endorsing Andrew Cuomo, and, of course, Mr. Trump putting forward his stance as well, with the fact that he will not be moving ahead with funds to the New York City if Mamdani becomes the mayor, which he, according to independent polls, seems to be the likely possibility. We, of course, will be taking a look at what that means in terms of the impact that that will have on not just in New York City, but for Mr. Trump in general, and then in the way that his government is going to respond to this particular region, and the way, of course, that huge expectations will be there for Mamdani to deliver. We're now going to be speaking to political analyst Kokab Farshori with regards to what really this means and what is the situation on ground and how exactly will these elections affect the current governance in the United States. Thank you very much, Farshori, for joining us and being a part of the newsroom today. I'd like your take first in terms of when we understand the situation. This, of course, is something that is expected to happen with regards to the kind of polls and trends that we are seeing already. And it seems that Mr. Trump is well aware of that too. So given the fact that we indeed have Mamdani as the first Muslim mayor of New York City, what will be the repercussions likely be from the White House?
So much for having me on the show. Of course, we've all seen that President Trump has been extremely vocal against candidate Mamdani. And of course, for obvious reasons, Trump represents the capitalist mindset because he's not in favor of a socialist mayor. And also, he thinks candidate Mamdani's ideas are very radical. So, but when it comes to day-to-day, realities, it won't really matter who's in the White House when it comes to the mayorship of New York City. So, Mamdani, if he's elected by the people of New York, and if he, it shouldn't so much matter because President Trump's term will end soon, and it'll be between Mamdani and the people of New York.
Right. Mr. Farshori, it is important also to, of course, see where the other candidates stand. And I want to start, of course, with Andrew Cuomo, because we have the endorsement of the U.S. President and Elon Musk as well. But there is also the cases of sexual harassment against him by the Department of Justice. How are the people viewing this?
Yeah, these were called the baggages for him. Political, he carried a lot of political baggage, and of course, you gain certain advantages by being in the politics for a very long time, but there are also disadvantages. So he had to fight all of that, and one of the reasons why Mamdani rose to prominence so quickly and so dramatically was because people were not very happy with Como, and especially because of these scandals. So naturally, they hurt him a lot in the long run. And Mamdani very, very smartly capitalized on all of that. And the fatigue factor of the old style politics People thought Mamdani was a breath of fresh air. He was a fresh voice. People thought he was energetic. He was young. He didn't have any political baggage. So that benefited him, and of course that hurt Cuomo a lot. And that's how Mamdani managed to get his party's nomination in the race.
Right. What about when we see the trends? Of course, we have seen Mamdani's lead, but do you think that there is a possibility of the third candidate, Silva's voters, also move toward Kumo and then change the overall inclination of these polls?
It can very well happen. Anything can happen. Mamdani is leading in the polls, no doubt about it. But the race is tight. We cannot say for sure. And of course, whenever there is a three-way race, the third party always plays an important role. So in this case, it can happen. It can go in Como's favor. It can hurt Mamdani, but Mamdani is still, or his camp is very confident that they'll pull through.
Where do you think are the key challenges that Mamdani faces? Because, of course, a lot of what you've said already has resulted in him getting this lead that we're seeing right now. But a lot of the same aspects are posing challenges to him becoming the mayor, and then, of course, as part of his tenure too. So given the fact that he will be the first Muslim, that he is young, he is energetic, and he's saying a lot of things very, very openly and is vocal with reference to what he wants to do and what he believes is incorrect, how will he be able to balance that with the Trump administration?
Yeah, these are lofty promises, grandiose ideas, and it always happens when you go on an election campaign. When you go door to door making promises, you have to make some promises which you even know as a candidate are unrealistic or may not be accomplished. So his biggest challenge would be the expectations from him. His campaign reminds me of President Obama's campaign in early 2008, when lots of lofty promises were made and people were very, very optimistic. And of course, that became a burden on President Obama. Naturally, he could not deliver all of those, the promises that he made. So I think the biggest challenge for him would be the promises that he has made. For example, rent freeze, free buses, grocery subsidies, and all of these things. They are, I mean, I'm not saying they are insurmountable, but they're definitely Herculean in terms of their accomplishments. So, and Mayor is not somebody. Yes, Mayor is an executive authority, but he has to depend a lot on the governor, and of course, he'll have to work with all many other departments to fulfill those promises, and that will be his biggest challenge.
Right. What do you think are the key voter demographics in New York City, and what seems to be the differences in who's voting for which candidate? Of course, we have a young Muslim mayor to be a possibility, but there is also a large population of Jews that are part of the New York City demographics. And so I want your take on whether or not Mamdani also has support across different religions, and how much of these factors are affecting who's voting for him.
Yeah, these are important factors, and I mean, New York, no matter which ethnic group you refer to, no matter which demographic you refer to, they are not a monolithic body. So, for example, you spoke about Jewish voters; they're split. Some of them are favoring Mamdani, but some of them are not favoring Mamdani. So we cannot say that he has one particular ethnic, or in terms of age wise, he has one group in his pocket. Yes, he has received an overwhelming support of young voters, so no doubt about it. That cuts across religious lines, ethnic lines, racial lines. That is for sure that he has managed to attract a lot of young voters. So that is something that he can be really proud of. Now, in terms of religion, even some Muslim groups are not supporting him. And in terms of Jewish voters, yes, again, as I said, they are always split. Some of them are supporting him, some of them are not supporting him. But the support that he has managed to gather, garner, I think is helping him, especially his grassroots level campaign. His grassroots level efforts have benefited him a lot, and that includes uh, all religious groups, all ethnic groups, all racial groups.
Right. Mr. Farshori, there's also, of course, concern as to the possibility of a cut in funds that Mamdani will have to face, because that is what the US president claims to be a plan to do if he gets to become the mayor.
These things are not that simple, because if he is faced with that kind of financial crunch that he cannot fulfill his fiduciary responsibilities as a mayor, then he will not face the backlash. The backlash will be on the White House or whoever, or even governor, because he directly deals with the governor, and Albany is the capital of New York State. So people will blame Albany for that. And New York is such an important city. If New York comes to a halt because of any of delay in funding, or any of stopping in funding, then of course he won't face the backlash, because Mamdani is very articulate, he's very smart, he knows how to get his message across. So it won't take him long to communicate to the people. And people here are smart, especially people in New York. They're educated people. They won't be able to uh, they cannot be deceived into thinking that it's Mamdani's fault if he's not receiving the required or the requisite resources. So if he cannot deliver because of the lack of resources that he should receive from the governor or the federal government, then of course he'll get even more sympathy from his voters. So doing that will not be that simple. It means hurting the people of New York, and nobody can afford to do that.
Right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Kokab Farshori, for joining us and being a part of the newsroom today. It is, of course, very, very integral to see who actually will be becoming the mayor of New York City, but the likelihood is that it will have its first Muslim mayor. We're now going to be taking a look at our last story that focuses on what is going on in Brazil ahead of COP30 that is planned to be held later this week. And there seems to be one of the deadliest crackdowns by police in Rio's history, in which more than 100 people have been killed. And this is, of course, something that the police says is targeting drug gangs, violence and confrontation. That is something that the area has been marred by for quite some time now. And so what really is going to be the integral aspect of such operations, the impact it has on actually curbing where it's stemming from, and then of course the way that it impacts the region as it prepares for COP30 are areas that we're going to be taking a look at in further detail as we explore this further. But there seems to be very serious and rigorous crackdown that has been put in place, and so this is a matter of huge concern as to what really will be the next steps. For this, we've been joined by Barrister Safi Ghauri, who's a political analyst. Thank you, Barrister Safi, for being part of the show today. And what's your take on when you look at the current situation? Of course, the crackdown is huge. The drug problem is real in Rio de Janeiro, and this is something that has been going on for quite some time now. But how do you see this confrontation that has happened between these drug gangs and the police, and where do you think the elements, all of the elements that have been involved, have gone wrong?
Right, thank you very much, Sana. So, Sana, right off the cuff, I'll just say that when we say that elements have gone wrong, might not be strictly correct. I think in this particular case, this was a very well thought out operation. This was planned, and this was one of the biggest operations against a drug gang in not just well, definitely in the history of Brazil, but also one of the biggest ones in the history of the world. We have already seen more than 140 casualties. But if you were to understand where this stems from, it's quite interesting in the way it took place. So the operation was held against Comando Vermelho, which is one of the biggest drug factions in all of South America. In fact, one of the biggest drug cartels in the world. And they have these favelas where they stay. And this particular one was being conducted in this favela called Complexo de Alemão, which means German complex. And Comando Vermelho has it's like a fortress there. It's very well cordoned off, and they've been carrying out these drug activities for quite a while. So the operation that was carried out again carried out by more than 2,500 military police people of different factions, including BOPI. BOPI is widely considered to be the most lethal unit of the Brazilian army. And so Boppy was there, Commando Vermela was there, and the action that took place was nothing short of what we would see in perhaps the biggest action blockbuster, in the sense that obviously, there was a huge fight, and we saw that Commando Vermela attacked Boppy with drones and with bomber drones. Like they actually attached bombs to drones, and then those drones were then sent on to the army and the police and retaliation of the different things that were happening. So just honestly, just like we're seeing like the kind of war between Russia and Ukraine right now, we were seeing drone attacks on each other. We were seeing huge armed guns. The military grade weapons that were being used by both sides were very high intense, and unfortunately, as a result of which, there were a lot of casualties. There was a massive number of arrests that were made, more than half a ton of drugs that were taken in, more than 100 high grade military grade weapons that were eventually confiscated by the Brazilian police and army, which were working together. Now, the bigger issue here is the kind of implication that this has created. Because,
Yeah.
firstly, this operation was done without federal consent. The president of Brazil did not know about it. This was authorized by the governor without them knowing. So, this creates a sort of like federal provincial discord between the people here, between the authorities here in Brazil. But apart from that, there's this huge fallout from international media as well. So we see that Brazil itself is quite divided on how this was carried out. Many people think that there was a massive violation of human rights, and this was done without due process of law. But there are also the majority of Brazil's, at least right now, as at the time of saying this, seems to be in support of this, because drug abuse has also become a problem, and Brazil is, sort of unfortunately beholden to a lot of these drug gangs. So in this process, as we see now, we are seeing a lot of different perspectives from international media. We see
Yeah.
some international leaders praising Brazil for this action. Others, like the president of Colombia, say that this was barbaric. We also see UNHCR, the saying that there was a massive sort of like there was a massive abuse of human rights, and there are people who are saying that, on the other side, they are saying that Brazil has finally taken real action against narco terrorism, which was plaguing the South American, Latin American region, and it has actually put an end to it. So it's a developing story, to be honest, Anna. Like there's
Right.
no easy way of looking at what this is. And also, I just want to add one more thing. The Comando Vermelha means Red Command. This comes from it being a former leftist party. It was a
Yeah.
leftist communist party that turned into a criminal organization. And why I say this is because they also seem to have, on the one hand, they are terrorizing ordinary people, and they are a declared criminal organization. But on the other hand, there are many people who like them as well, because they stand with their older ideology. So that is also something that needs to be considered when we talk about these
Right,
things.
absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Barrister Safi, because I wanted to explore that a little bit more. Because despite whatever mixed opinions we have from the international community, what I want to focus on is whether or not the key objective has been achieved. Because, of course, there are more questions that have also been raised, including human rights abuses, or the fact that the top leader was not captured. Does it really answer the problem that Brazil is facing at the moment? Does it put an end to the kind of drug gangs that exist, or a possible retaliation that can come in, or the leaders being brought under captivity? What really will be the objective when we take a look at this in the larger sense? I understand the raid may have been successful, let's just say, but in terms of really achieving the goal, do you think that that's been done? Because the problem at its core still remain unaddressed.
Oh, of course, Sana. So let's be very clear on this. They currently, when they attacked, this particular battle, so to speak, took place. This took place in Rio de Janeiro, which is just one city, and this took place in just one favela of Rio de
Yeah.
Janeiro, which is, as I told you already, Complexo de Alamão. There are many other favelas where Comando Vermelha is still there, and Comando Vermelha is not the only gang. There are many other gangs. It's in fact the second biggest gang. There is actually a gang much bigger than Comando Vermelha as well, currently in Brazil. So not only, what we see is currently just a very small uh, part of what could perhaps be a much bigger war. So 100%, I can say with
Yeah.
absolute confidence that the objective has not been fulfilled. But as per the governor of Rio de Janeiro, their objective was to deliver a message, and that message has been delivered. And perhaps that's what it is. This is an evolving strategy. We don't really know how far this will go, what the implications will be, how these gangs will then eventually work amongst themselves, or maybe there will be further splits between them. So these are all things that we obviously have to sit and watch, and rightly so. This is a concern of ordinary Brazilians as well, because they think that this could be a violent spillover that would impact them. But on the other hand, I also want to add here that many people think that this was international messaging before COP30 would take place, so that people would understand that Brazil is a law-abiding society, and at the end of the day, this entire raid took place in response to enforcement of court warrants against some of the leaders of CV. So since those warrants they were trying to enforce those warrants, and these people were still in the hiding, that's why such a massive operation took place. So one could
Right.
also, once again, both views of looking at it are probably correct. There is no one realistically correct view on the matter.
Right. Does this in any way impact the way that the international community will take a look at or participate in COP30 that Brazil is hosting soon?
Right. This is a very good question. COP30 currently, Sana, has several other problems. So COP30 is taking place in Belém. I also actually am invited to COP30 and would have wanted to go and attend. I cannot go to attend because Belém is a city that is on the edge of the Amazon rainforest, and it's not a very well developed city. So hosting such an international conference in such a small city where there are no hotels, where there are no places for you to be able to go and actually reside for a day or two is what the real problem is. What we have already been experiencing sitting here in Brazil for a very long time is that people from different embassies have been talking to the government saying that they will not be able to attend, not because of security reasons, not because of any other reason other than infrastructural issues. However, the Brazilian government would want to insist that they did this operation to make people feel safer when attending COP30. Once again, if you were to understand how drug routes work, they seem to originate mostly from the Amazon rainforest. The majority of the production of cocaine and some of these other drugs that seem to be fentanyl that seem to be going through this area seem to come from Colombia. They go through the Amazon rainforest, going through places like Belém, where the COP30 convention is, and then head into Rio de Janeiro. From Rio de Janeiro, go south to Santos, and then from Santos, they get distributed all over the world. And something very interesting, by the way, I think should also be mentioned here is that one of the biggest drug busts in world history was recently conducted by Pakistan Navy. And since most of this drug was cocaine, I would presume that this same route of Rio de Janeiro, Santos, and Brazilian ports was used before it was heading towards Karachi, where Pakistan Navy intercepted it. But what we see clearly now is that we see there's a more concentrated global effort to stop drug trafficking from taking place. And when Brazil plays its part by conducting internal raids, I think this increases global confidence in how Brazil is tackling the drug problem. Also, of course, last but not the least, I want to mention here that when we look at Latin America, you have to see it from the lens of security as well. And we see that currently there is a US aircraft carrier that has been stationed outside Venezuela. And the allegation against Venezuela supposedly is that they are providing fentanyl and drugs that is getting into the US, and that is why US wants to invade Venezuela. So when Brazil carries out action internally against drug gangs, it sends out a signal to the US that we are not a problem. We are tackling drugs on our own. You don't need to send any troops or impose any tariffs on us or try and state before the world that we are in any manner involved towards narcotic trades. And if you want to, then you can go and attend to Venezuela or Colombia or Mexico, however so you want to. So I think that's also part of like sort of the messaging towards the US military buildup in the region.
Right. Off topic, Barrister Safi, but there were reports that parts of the rainforest were being cleared to host COP30. Is that true?
Of course, yes. This led to a massive brouhaha in Brazil. I think a lot of people have been very upset about it. But Sana, this is something that once again, being here in Brazil, we have to understand that things are a little more different from how they come about. There were images, and I've seen those images of huge stretches of rainforest that were cleared. But the rainforest, as it is a rainforest, and it grows very rapidly. So it's being cleared regularly, anyways, and it's growing back in a matter of weeks, anyways. Now, if you were to just sort of look at um, Manaus, for instance, from a Google Maps or Google Earth perspective, you will see that this is a city that is in the center of Amazonia, which is where the majority of the rainforests of the world are. And in order to keep Manaus up, they always have to keep clearing rainforests. Otherwise, the rainforest will just eat up the city immediately. There is no way a city could exist there. It's not natural. So yes, of course, when they're doing such things, they have to do so in an unnatural manner. And this was one of the biggest criticisms on how COP30 is being conducted here in Brazil. The fact that they were clearing the rainforest, and also the fact that they did not have any infrastructure to carry it out. This is a chicken and egg situation, Sana. I mean, think about it from a Pakistan perspective. We have very pristine areas in the north of Pakistan. We want people to come to that area, but if we were to invite people to come to that area, we'll have to build infrastructure, we'll have to build roads, we'll have to clear out parts of what that beauty is in order to accommodate people. And that will come at some sort of an environmental cost. So, do you want to pay that environmental cost so that more people can visit, or do you not want to? Is a question that is eventually up to a state to decide.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Barrister Safi, for joining us and being part of the newsroom. Of course, much remains to be seen as how the situation evolves. We'll be here to talk about it, but that's all that we have from the newsroom today. We'll now see you tomorrow.